It is 2023 now, and with the Theorist wheel of channels finally complete, I think it's time for a rebrand. I really want these channels to go back to their roots, you know, like really back to the basics. No, I don't just mean going back to 2011. I mean we're going all the way back to before the dawn of color. We are going black and white here, people. Yeah, just differentiate all the channels in shades of gray. That won't be confusing at all. And you know what? Circles, they're outdated. They're not hip and fresh. Nowadays, those Gen Zers, those Zoomers, they want them triangles, baby. 4 quadrants, 3 sides. We're making this thing into the Theorist Triforce, the Theory Force. So that way, subliminally, you're reminded of some of your favorite old retro gaming franchises, but for a new modern age. And then to really hammer home what we're doing here, we need the word theory to be big, front and center. Bigger, even bigger. You're huge. Make it huge. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Food Theory, where you can always stop in for a crisp and refreshing swig of information. Have you seen the new Pepsi logo? One of the oldest brands in cola has a new logo set to land on all Pepsi packaging in fall of 2023, and the Internet is already fizzing about it months before its eventual release. The new logo, which departs a lot from the sleek, flat, subtle Pepsi design of the last decade, now punches shoppers in the face with lines, angles, and a kind of "it's Pepsi whether you like it or not" vibe. As soon as this new look was announced, every armchair marketing guru from Twitter to TikTok started passing their judgment on this new design. The internet's collective big feelings only escalated after learning that Pepsi spent a whopping $1 million to design this thing, which just goes to show that I've been in the wrong industry this entire time. In all seriousness though, please don't tell our editors and graphic designers that they can just slap together something that looks like a 5-minute Photoshop job and then bang out 7 figures. This is putting me in a really tough spot here, Pepsi. But to that point, the internet already has plenty of bones to pick with this new logo, which at first glance strikes me as a little bit weird. All these angles in the font, the design of the P makes it look like Depsy, some sort of sad store brand cola. Then there's the lettering size, which feels slightly too big for where it's placed. The color scheme that makes you want to schedule your next eye exam, there's a lot going on here. And even though this new logo looks nothing like the previous one, at the same time there's something familiar about it. If you're a soda aficionado like I am, or you're tuning in to the over 65 demographic, shout out to you 3% of our audience, you probably noticed that this new rebrand is just Pepsi's logo from 1962, just with an extra strange font in the middle. So all of this has led to the collective question, what's going on with this thing? Why would Pepsi create a worse version of their own 60-year-old logo? When I first saw it, I thought, well, I guess we just chalk this one up to another huge corporation flushing a bunch of money down the drain. But after doing some digging, it turns out that I couldn't be more wrong. Yep, I'm here to tell you that Pepsi is actually laughing all the way to the bank with this one. This logo is like the 4D chess of the fizzy beverage world. If you hate this new Pepsi logo, watch this episode and I pretty much guarantee that by the end, you're gonna like it. Or, at the very least, you're gonna be forced to respect it. And I guess if you already liked it, well then you could just lord your superiority over me and then get a lot of knowledge about Pepsi that you can trot out at parties. Trust me, I'm planning on using all of this information in this episode at my next family get-together with my Aunt Corey, who drinks nothing but Pepsi. So, this one's for you, Aunt Corey. To understand what Pepsi's up to here, it's helpful to know the history of their logos. As it turns out, Pepsi has drastically changed its logos a lot of times. Unlike other soda brands like Coca-Cola, which is famous for never changing the core logo. Why? Well, because since the early days of its history, Pepsi has differentiated itself by being the quote-unquote cool cola, the one that keeps up with the times, and they do that by changing their logo a lot. The original Pepsi logo debuted in 1898 right next to us here in North Carolina, our little Pepsi neighbor friends. The word Pepsi was actually based on the word dyspepsia, which means indigestion, and it came out as one of several drinks at the time designed to settle your tummy and cure what ails ya. The Pepsi logo debuted in this bright red font that was full of spikes, which felt a lot more Hot Topic than refreshing beverage. Through the 1940s, they kept the concept, but softened up the lines a few times to copy the look and feel of Coca-Cola's swoopy, curvy design, since Coke was dominating the market. We've talked in previous episodes about how Coca-Cola ramped its marketing budget way up during the Great Depression and won big as a result of it. So at this point in its history, Pepsi wasn't ready to become the cool cola, it was just trying to survive for a couple decades by riding Coke's coattails. That all changed in 1950 when Pepsi decided to step out of Coke's shadow by rebranding itself based on the cool, hip word of the moment, patriotism. That's right, following the Allies' victory in World War II, there was this huge surge of Go USA sentiment, which Pepsi then took advantage of in the most American way possible by exploiting it for marketing. Pepsi slapped their logo, which would go from cursive to block letters, right in the middle of a red, white, and blue globe, implying that America was the global winner and that winners drink Pepsi. They marketed themselves throughout the 1950s and 60s as as the drink for those who think young, thereby differentiating themselves from your dad's Coca-Cola. Because this is the brand new era of rock and roll, baby. You got the Beatles, you got Elvis. They are comfortable with those hips a-shaking. This then is the angle that they stuck with for the rest of the brand's history. You can even see Britney Spears echoing the same line in her 2002 Pepsi Super Bowl commercial.
For those who think young.
When the counterculture movements got started in the early 60s, Pepsi updated their logo again and came out with a new marketing slogan, the Pepsi Generation, all about the new cool kids, the hippies. They flattened their globe logo to meet the new generation's mod aesthetic. About 10 years later, they were ready to prove again that they were cool and with it, so in 1975, Pepsi launched the Pepsi Challenge, where they dared people to compare Pepsi to Coke and move on from their quote-unquote outdated notions that Coke was better, continuing to hammer home the idea that Pepsi was younger, it was hipper, it was more fun. I like imagining Pepsi as like the living embodiment of the like, hey fellow kids meme. Just slap Pepsi's logo right there on that meme. 1991 was a seminal year for the Pepsi logo, commonly known as the breakup, where Pepsi removed their name from the now iconic globe and sent it floating off into the ether. The Pepsi logos from then on would all feature italics letters that slanted forward because Pepsi is a forward-thinking soda for new generations. As time would go on, the logo would lean more blue to erase any shared similarities with the rival Coke. Pushing toward 2000, we got into the weird quasi-3D era of Pepsi, where the globe got rounder and Pepsi announced the Joy of Cola movement, featuring a young child of the new millennium to shift Pepsi again to yet another new generation. Like other logos at the end of the 90s and beginning of the 2000s, everything got shiny and 3D, before eventually returning in the 20-teens to flat, overly casual designs that could be turned into app tiles. Pepsi's current logo prior to this new rebrand is a version of this flattened, globy, stripy ball with an all-lowercase logo intended to mimic the casual branding of cool tech companies from the last 10 years. This logo is also supposed to kind of look like an emoji, subliminally evoking a smile, indicating that unlike certain stodgy older brands, Pepsi is younger, a little cheeky, and knows how to text and understands what an eggplant splash really means. This last branding update, which debuted in 2008, cost Pepsi $1 million to design, and for the first time in Pepsi's long history of marketing, it was widely considered to be a swing and a miss. The logo wasn't symmetrical, the name is shoved awkwardly to the side, and instead of coming across as a drink for cool people, it instead came across as a drink for marketing tryhards. People called it a ripoff of Obama's logo in the wake of his successful 2008 campaign, and it was viewed as somehow both lazy and overwrought. It's been languishing in branding purgatory ever since. So why did I just drag you through an entire page worth of Pepsi history? I do this to highlight just how important it's been for those last 100 years that Pepsi look cool in the eyes of the public, and to show you that the last attempt they made at this in 2008 was a huge miss compared to the 90 years of success that came before. The weight of Pepsi's history as the cool cola, combined with the pressure to win big this time around, creates a unique pressure cooker moment for Pepsi right now. And it's all come to a head with this, the biggest rebrand they've done in the last 40 years. So let's just go back and look at what started this whole discussion in the first place. This new logo. One of the world's biggest brands with practically all the money in the universe came up with a logo that just looks like it's the 1950s all over again. So has the new generation cola brand just given up and gone back to its roots? The answer is a resounding no. Pepsi is actually doing what they've always done. It's just harder to make out this time. At first glance, this logo seems to make no sense whatsoever, but here's my take. Pepsi is, in fact, changing their logo for the new generation, and this iteration of the Pepsi logo is gonna nail it. Don't believe me? Let's look a little bit closer, shall we? At first glance, the globe and letters of this logo seem to be a big fat retread of a bygone era of Pepsi's history, but like uglier and a little bit worse. So how then does this represent a connection with a new generation? Well, it's important to identify who exactly that new generation is, and at this moment, the target demographic for all the big retailers, brands, and yes, soda companies is Gen Z, a demographic that spans late high school through their upper 20s. And lucky for Pepsi, they also happen to be a generation obsessed with nostalgia. From vinyl records to coastal grandma chic fashion, a resurgence of Tamagotchis to an interest in drive-in theaters, Gen Z loves old stuff. There are plenty of possibilities for why this is the case, and Pepsi's been trying to play into several of them with this rebrand. One thought is that Gen Z has grown up on the internet, and they've spent their lives being exposed to mostly short-lived media in the form of viral videos and TikTok trends. There's nothing in their pop culture that feels tangible, nothing that feels permanent or lasting. Looking for something that feels stable in a world with a TikTok attention span has pushed Gen Z into a love of nostalgic brands that feel more historic and more stable. Brands like Pepsi. Going hand in hand with that, Gen Z has grown up with the pressures of constantly seeing their lives online, trying to measure up to the image of social media perfection. By contrast, nostalgia brands harken back to a simpler time, without the pressure of an online comment section, which makes them attractive to romanticize for Gen Z, who's stressed out and overwhelmed by constantly having to go up against the court of public opinion. Pepsi hits the mark for a Gen Z nostalgia brand with its long history and tangible eras. It is basically the Taylor Swift of soda. When you combine this with the idea that Gen Z actually has access to a lot of nostalgia brands, from eBay's vintage clothing market to Spotify's retro playlist recommendations, you see how this generation is best positioned to love and appreciate brands that embrace the retro analog side. TLDR, by leaning old, Pepsi is actually appealing directly to the new soda drinkers of today. And this connection even goes a level deeper. While Gen Z certainly loves nostalgia, they don't embrace the values of those older eras. This generation wants to right the wrongs of the past, to promote more ethical standards on everything from race to mental health, and yes, even food. Up-and-coming consumers are outspokenly against food additives, processed foods, as well as the big S word, sugar. While Gen Z doesn't care as much about fat and cholesterol as previous generations, 30% of Gen Z claims to avoid sugar completely. How the heck is a soda company full of sugar and sweeteners supposed to come across as acceptable to that kind of consumer? Well, it's easy if you know anything about subliminal messaging. And you can bet that Pepsi's marketing team knows a lot. Pepsi's always had a lot of symbolism in their logo, but did you know the colors they use subliminally convey emotions? It's not something underhanded or unusual in and of itself. Most brands choose a color that represents them based on how they want you to feel about them. Even our logo for Food Theory, it's yellow because we wanted it to convey a happy, lighthearted perspective on food, and we wanted it to fit in with the other yellow logos on YouTube to help people accept it as part of the food community. For Pepsi, its colors represent its emotional values. The blue is meant to symbolize the refreshment of Pepsi, it's thirst quenching. The red is meant to symbolize Pepsi as an exciting, even sporty drink. And the white in the logo was always meant to represent the drink's sugary sweetness. But now all of this is surrounded by black. Why? Fast Company posits that it's meant to make you think of Pepsi Black, the only other place where Pepsi has ever used this color, and the only version of Pepsi with no sugar printed right there on the bottle. More explicitly, Pepsi CEO has stated that zero, quote, will be at the center of their strategy for the Pepsi brand going forward because he's seeing consumers pivoting to those sorts of options. Subliminally, consumers who don't want sugar in their drinks are more likely to associate black Pepsi branding as a healthier soda, reading the color as a refreshing beverage with no sugar that's exciting to drink. So, while the new logo might look like a random smattering of colors that don't mesh together, they're working overtime for your subconscious and the subconscious of the new generation that Pepsi cares about the most. So, having overcome Gen Z's love for nostalgia and their aversion to sugar, at least subliminally, the last thing that's left in the fight for this generation is attention. There has never been so many brands competing for you to spend your money on them. And with a million things to watch and pay attention to online, how is Pepsi supposed to stand out? Well, their answer is the same as everyone else's: clickbait. Take a look again at this new Pepsi logo. It's bold, it's focused, it's clean, and between the size of the letters and that weirdly pointy font, there's just something off about it. It's not a beautiful logo. It's a bit ugly, and that ugliness makes it stand out. In other words, it's clickable, like a thumbnail where the eyes are just a little bit too big, or a brand with a really garish color that tries to capture your attention. The new Pepsi logo is designed to stand out in a sea of images. One thing that I think Pepsi has realized through this branding initiative that a lot of other food and beverage companies haven't caught on to yet is that they're not competing with the same players they were 15 or even 10 years ago. It used to be that food and beverage brands only competed with each other. Pepsi competes with Coke. It's the classic rivalry. But now brands are competing on a whole other playing field. They're competing against creators. Don't believe me? Well, just take a look at the episode that I did on Prime from Logan Paul, which is quickly eating Gatorade's lunch. Feastables by Mr. Beast has swooped in and completely crushed every competitor in the chocolate bar category. By the way, it has made more than the $10 million that I stated in that Prime episode. 50 million, 100 million? I don't know, I just recited the publicly facing number, but Jimmy, I know that it bothered you, so if you want to leave a comment down below, I'll make sure it gets pinned. Anyway, the point is that the future of these food and beverage companies is looking a little shaky in the face of creators and their millions of, oh yeah, Gen Z fans. Other categories that are ready to be turned upside down in the next couple years are cereal, the entire snack aisle, energy bars, and yes, soda. You didn't sponsor me, Diet Coke, and now Theorists be coming for you. In order to compete with these brands, Pepsi has to attract some serious attention, and in the age of the internet, you don't do that by making your brand subtle. In fact, you make it by doing the exact opposite. You make sure that it's immediately eye-catching, recognizable in a single glance, like maybe you put your name in huge letters on a red, white, and blue background. It's just an idea. So now you know the secrets of the new Pepsi logo, why it matters so much to Pepsi, and exactly who it was designed for. The bigger takeaway though is that every brand you see around you is trying to appeal to you or probably someone like you in a specific way, whether or not you realize it. The $1 million that Pepsi spent on this silly looking logo seems like a lot, but once you understand just how much money is at stake here, that is one thumbnail that you don't want to underperform. But hey, that's just a theory. A food theory. Bon appetit. And hey, if you want to learn the story of how Pepsi once had its own navy, click the video on the left. Or if you want to check out something from the rival brand, crack open the video on the right, which is all about how Santa Claus created Sprite. See you next week, my friends.